You're listening to 107.9 WRML LP Mays Landing. Coming up next, a look at last week's retro video game news on the RGN Files for the week ending Sunday, April 1st, 2018. In the RGN Files this week, it has been unofficially announced and confirmed that WWE superstar John Cena will be playing the lead role in an upcoming full-length motion picture based on the Duke Nukem franchise. The initial entry in the popular series first hit computers back in 1991, and since then a plethora of sequels and spin-offs have been produced for a wide variety of video game consoles and computers. The movie will be coming to us from Paramount Pictures alongside of Platinum Dunes, with Andrew Form and Brad Fuller taking on production duties of the film. Form has said about the movie, quote, "You know that having a misogenic guy in today's world, how do you make that fun and lovable? At the same time, he's got to be an incredible badass, so those are the things that we're struggling with, and we're going to try to come out with what I hope is a really fun ride," end quote. While John Cena has been considered for the part of the title role since this past January, there is still a possibility that he may not take on the role when the script is finally written. There is currently no word on additional cast information that may be taking part in the film, and because there is still no official script finished, there is also no information about a possible release date. Independent homebrew development team CollectorVision has made the announcement of an estimated release time for their upcoming port of the game Temporal Incorporated to be released for the Nintendo NES. CollectorVision developed the title as a homage to a game that was first released for an interactive video system called VideoWay, which was available in Quebec, Canada during the late 80s throughout the 2000s. Now called Dead Tomb, the game is a port of the game Temporal Incorporated, which was released for that service. In the year 3017, the VideoWay Corporation, your employer, sends you to study on the last ice age, which ended at about 10,000 BC. During this long journey through space and time, your ship is experiencing technical problems while you fly to Egypt in 1300 BC. You have to land your ship for repairs, and the only accessible place is the truncated top of a huge pyramid. And while you're almost done, the only thing left is to replace the diamond, which is used for the time-space generator. And that is when the Pharaoh's first soldiers find you, and you wake up inside the pyramid with a huge bump on your head. The physical release will include the game cartridge alongside of a box and manual, and also will include a walkthrough guide as well as a homage letter to the original game. Dead Tomb is slated to be released this coming summer, and there is currently no pricing information available at this time. Continuing with homebrew-related news, a brand new port of the classic Apple II video game Prince of Persia has been released to a computer system better known across the pond, the BBC Micro. The original Prince of Persia was first released for the Apple II back in 1989 from Broderbund, and despite not being a big success at the start, would ultimately be released for multiple platforms, including the NES, Genesis, alongside of the Commodore Amiga and Atari ST. The new port to the BBC Micro was created by a group of independent programmers that call themselves the Bit Shifters, who have been working on the title since April of last year. One of the Bit Shifters, known as Kiernan, stated that there were a lot of interesting technical challenges involved in the project, and that he believed it would be possible to create a faithful version of the game that features the best aspects of the BBC Micro. The BBC Micro was a computer first released back in 1981 and was created for the British Broadcasting Corporation by Acorn Computer Company as a part of the BBC Computer Literacy Project. The new BBC Micro port of Prince of Persia requires a system with 128K of RAM, meaning that it will only run on the BBC Master model. The game was able to fit on a single 200K disk image and can also be played online using a web browser via emulation. And finally this week, continuing with the Apple II related news, initial information has been made available for the 30th anniversary of Kansas Fest, a yearly convention dedicated to the legacy computer platform. Since 1988, Kansas Fest has brought together faithful fans of the Apple II to Kansas City, not just in the gaming fashion, but alongside of hobbyists, alongside with hardware and software programmers and homebrewers. This year's convention will be taking place at the Rockhurst University in Kansas City between Tuesday, July 17 and Sunday, July 22nd for 6 days and 5 nights of sessions, demonstrations, announcements, and contests. All Apple II fans, users, programmers, gamers, hobbyists, alongside of other retro computing enthusiasts, are invited to attend the convention. And while the Apple II is always the main attraction each year, other retro computers and gaming consoles of the same era are also discussed. The keynote speaker for this year's event is Roger Wagner, who back in 1978 started his own software publishing company and sold popular titles such as the Merlin Assembler and the ASCII Express. He wrote for a variety of major publications of the era, but is best remembered for his long-running Assembly Lines column in Soft Talk magazine. The first Apple II computers were introduced in 1977 and remained in production until the end of 1993. That's it for this week's edition of the RGN Files. For those of you listening on VGM on FM, please stay tuned. There'll be more video game music coming up shortly. For those of you listening on RetroGameNetwork.com, we thank you for listening and hope you'll tune in again next time. For complete details of any of this week's stories, visit RetroGameNetwork.com. For the RGN Files, I'm Christopher Chrisman. This week's news stories provided by the following: Cinema Blend, Collector Vision, GameSpot, Kansas Fest, Vintage is the New Old. You're listening to VGM on FM on 107.9 WRML. Now, back to the music.